Good evening. This is Curriculum 252, Instructional Strategies for English Language Learners. And as I mentioned last week, this is going to be a kind of do-it-yourself, watch this at your leisure, but before it's time for our session 3. So there'll be times when I'll ask you to pause the video, and then you can take a look at the slide instead of me reading it aloud. All right, so let's get going here. Week number 2, I titled this session Orienteering, where we are and where we need to go. And orienteering is navigating, finding your way. And I just kind of want to review that last week we focused on who are our English learners, the level that they might be. We talked about long-term English learners. We looked at our English learners as an asset for us in our classrooms. This week we are going to kind of dig in a little deeper about how do we know what our English learners' needs are, and then how do we meet those needs? So looking at assessments, actually, how do we know where they are in their language development? We learn about that through assessments, and particularly the LPAC, which we'll take a look at. And then once we kind of know where they are, now where are we going to go with them? Okay, where we need to go. So that's kind of what we're covering in this session. So our agenda, I'm going to click through this and I'm going to just pause and have you pause the slide as you need to, or pause the presentation as you need to take a look at this. All right, so our learning objectives for tonight. My goal is for us to explore the LPAC, to understand why the LPAC, or the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California, why it's given and who takes it. It's always, we love acronyms in education. I'm sure I've said that before, and you will always hear it called the LPAC. But I think it's important that at some point we talk about, or that you know what that stands for. So English Language Proficiency. See, here I am. Assessment. The A is assessment for California. There are other assessments. Other states have different assessments that they use, but we use the LPAC. All right, we're going to look at, we're not going to go into a lot of depth about what exactly the kids have to do, the students have to do when they take the LPAC, because the chances are most of you are not ever going to be administering the test, but there's a chance that you will. More importantly, though, in my mind, is that at least you know when your kids are going out to take the LPAC what they're going to be asked to do. And then when you look at the results, you'll know what the results represent, what they were asked to do and what the results represent. We'll take a look at the LPAC reporting level. So once a student has taken the LPAC and they get the results back, what exactly do those reporting levels mean? There are performance level descriptors that are associated with the reporting levels. So we're going to take a look at that, the performance level descriptors and the ELD proficiency levels. They're different, but very similar. All right, we're going to look at a student score report so that you're familiar with it. It might be something down the road that you will see. It would live in a student's CURR folder. Very often, though, and I'll say this later on this evening, you're going to be finding the LPAC results through the student information system that you're using, whether it's like ARIES or whatever your district in your school is using. That's where generally we go to find the LPAC results. We don't actually look at the hard copy that lives in the student's CURR folder. I want you to understand by the end of the evening a homework assignment that you're going to have, which is to look at, it's the holistic English language student profile. Okay, and we'll go into that in a lot more detail so that you understand what the expectation is for that assignment. And also I'm going to be introducing another assignment that's going to be a long-term assignment. It won't be due until the end of our sessions, until session 5, but it's the ELL Instructional Supports and Strategies log. So I hope you, by the end of this session, that you'll understand what you need to do for both of those assignments. And we are going to actually begin digging into strategies. So this class is called English Language Learner Strategies. We haven't yet really talked about strategies. We are going to start tonight, and we're going to start looking at strategies that help us support our students' oral literacy, their speaking, okay, and listening, actually, their oral literacy standards, all right? So, of course, we're covering a lot this evening, and because of that, there are a plethora of teacher performance expectations that we're going to be touching on. So I'm going to click through these slides. Feel free to pause and take a look at all the TPEs. We will be, like I said, touching on some in more depth than others, but these are our TPEs for this evening. A lot, right? Okay. So I wanted to briefly just kind of bring our minds back to what you did for homework for this session. You had the class profile assignment that's due before tonight's class. And that was, of course, where you took one of your classes and you listed the students and you gathered information. You gathered data about each of your students. I will admit it's a big assignment. It's a little bit onerous, and it seems like, oh, this is a lot. I will tell you, by looking at your student information system, it can streamline it quite a bit. If that information should basically all be living in your student information system. But there's something really powerful about having all that information in one spot. How many ELs do you have? What levels are those students? What other needs are in your class? How many students do you have who have IEPs or 504s, and what are those? So it really, are there GATE students? It gives you a bird's eye view of your class. And in many cases, and I've heard from so many interns over the years with this, and not only interns, this class profile used to be a requirement for teacher induction, which is something you'll do once you receive your preliminary credential. You'll be in teacher induction for a couple of years. It used to be called, back in the day, it used to be called BITSA. This class profile was a requirement to do. And I've heard from so many people over the years, wow, this explains a lot why this particular class is this way. All right. So again, I want to recognize it was potentially quite a bit of work, but it is valuable work in allowing us to see who our students are in a quick snapshot, at least the data surrounding our students. All right, you also looked at, you read chapters 1 and 2 in the ELD standards, which chapter 1 went over the organization of the standards when you're looking at those. And then chapter 2 was talking about the proficiency descriptors. So when you're looking at the standards for your particular grade level and you're looking at the description, particularly in section 2, where it's talking about what a student should be able to do in the emerging level, in the expanding level, and in the bridging level, are 3 proficiency descriptors, that you understand what that means and how our ELD standards are organized. I will say that, have we been in person, if this class was done in person, I think the easiest way to go through and read chapters 1 and 2 is to actually have your grade level standards in front of you. And so when they're talking about section 1 or section 2, you're looking at what they're talking about on your particular standards. And I hope that you did that. Actually, I will would have suggested that in session 1 that you have a copy of your grade level standards in front of you, your ELD standards in front of you, so that when you're reading chapter 1 and chapter 2, you can be referencing specifically your standards. So I do also want to recognize the fact that this is a lot. This is, for many of you, probably the first time that you have looked at the ELD standards, become familiar with them. And I certainly do not expect mastery after reading chapters 1 and 2, that you're like, oh, I've got this. I know what this whole document is about and how to read it and how to understand it. I don't expect that. In fact, this class is, because we're 5 sessions, this could be a year-long class. It's 5 sessions. It's an introduction to, and over the course of the next 2 years of your credential work, you're going to be sort of meeting these, some of the things we were introduced to in this course. You'll be looking at them in different ways in different classes. So this is, again, just an introduction, getting your feet wet, getting you to understand that this document exists and how it can be used in your classroom for your teaching assignment, right? Now, and I say that too, because some of you are going to, you have a class where you look out when you've done your class profiles and, wow, I have a lot of English language learners in my class. Some of you might not have any, right? But that doesn't mean you'll never have any. And I want you to keep that in mind also as we go through this, this course and in courses in the future, that what your assignment is right now is not necessarily what your assignment's going to look like in 3 years or in 5 years. And when I look back over my career of 30 plus years, I have taught so many different things, grade levels and subject kind of focuses within English language arts, that I never would have dreamed given my first year or 2 of teaching. So we want to keep that sort of growth mindset, that lifelong learning commitment, and know that maybe what you're learning about right now, while it might not seem relevant to you immediately, may very well be very relevant to you down the road. So to become at least familiar that certain documents exist and how to look at data, I think it's really important. Okay. So we looked at those ELD standards, and then I had you read for homework chapter 1 in scaffolding language, scaffolding learning. And I think there were some really important points that were touched on in chapter 1. One of the ones that comes to my mind right off the bat is that zone of proximal development, the ZPD, where we're always, and whether this is with our English language learners or our students, we're always trying to teach one notch above what they are comfortable with, right? We're challenging them. And though through the challenge, then it is necessary to scaffold, and understanding what we mean by scaffolding, in that this is something that helps students to reach that higher level, but it's not something that's going to be there all the time, that eventually we take the scaffolding away because they're able to do it on their own. And I loved that example in the book of the conversation that a little boy was having with his parents, and how they were adding to his story. That's kind of that type of scaffolding, that we're there to help. It's done in real time, in the moment kind of thing, as needed. So I think that the zone of proximal development, the Vygotsky information is important, as well as sort of that mindset that what our students bring as English language learners is asset-based, that we have an asset-based outlook. And we, of course, covered that in our first session too. That's kind of a shift, to be honest, sad to say, but a shift, that our English learners aren't there to be fixed, right? They're not there that there's some sort of deficit that they have because they don't speak English. And I think in the past, 20 years ago, that was the mindset. We've got to fix this. This is a deficit. a deficit model. Well, no, we see it as an asset model, that that what they bring to the classroom, the wealth of knowledge about a different culture, that's all that can be, that's wonderful material to be mined, and it makes the classroom experience richer for the other students. So they talked a little bit about that in chapter 1 as well. Right, so it's a great text. We're not going to be reading the entire thing. There'll be a part where, you know, a few chapters we're going to read, and then it goes into a more of an elementary school teaching reading kind of a thing. So we'll read the parts that I think are really relevant for all of us, especially single subject teachers, because, you know, most of you are teaching in middle school, high school, and that you know, the elementary level is something that you're going to be dealing with, because your credential is not going to let you do that, right, as a single subject person. All right, so let's move on. So this is, and we're going to come back to this later, but this is a homework assignment that uses the classroom profile, your class profile assignment that you did for tonight, or was due tonight, by tonight. This is a springboard. It's like a part 2 of that. So what you're going to be doing is then choosing, for the holistic EL student profile, EL students from your student profile. Now, if you don't have any EL students in that class that you did your student, you know, your class profile, maybe you need to choose another class. Or, I mean, you don't have to choose the whole class, but you're choosing EL students for this particular document, okay? And you need to do at least one, if you have one, and no more than 5. If you have a lot of EL students and you have enough to, you can easily choose 5. I would like it if you would choose different levels of your EL students, maybe a student that is just learning English or just developing his or her English language, all the way up to a student who is very proficient in English, but is still designated an English language learner, okay? So here are the directions. I'm gonna click on this just so we can take a look at them. So it says here you created your class profile. So now we're going to take a deeper look at our EL students, choose no more than 5 students, and you're going to complete the holistic student profile for each. Now, where are you going to find your information? The same place that you found your information for your class profile, your student information system. If you find that you're not able to find this information through your SIS, then, you know, ask a mentor. I would say there should be major red flags, though, if this information is not readily available to you. This is vital information for us as teachers to know about our students, what their results are from some of these tests. Because tonight, again, we're going to talk more about, so now that we know what this level is, what does that mean for us as teachers? You'll notice here, if you have more than 5 students who are ELs, choose a range, hopefully from level 1 through level 4. And that level, we're referring to the level, the LPAC results. And I am most interested in your anecdotal data section and the analysis and goals. So this is that part, and I'll click back to the document itself. That's where you take the numbers, the data, these are the scores on the LPAC, these are the scores on the CASP test, and you connect those scores to a real human being. You connect it to the student, and you are thinking about goals for that student. So the assignment's worth 25 points, and it's due October 5th. So our next, by our next class. But let me go back here to the document itself. So you're going to put the student's name in, their first name and a last initial to help, keep confidentiality. Now here, you're going to go to the LPAC scores. There's an overall score you will find there. And okay, let me say this too. As I show you this, I said later on in the slide deck, we're going to look at this again because I have filled one out for you. Okay, I've given you an example of what this is going to look like. So hopefully that will help. But as I'm going over this kind of just a flyby, you'll do the overall LPAC score, and then you'll give me the scores for oral language, written language, and then it's broken up into listening, speaking, reading, writing. You'll have scores for all of these, all right? Then I'd also like you to access the CASP data from the the SBAC, right? The CASP, their ELA score, English Language Arts score, and their math score, and then any other that might be there. They might have a science score or something like that. Now you're going to take that, and then you're going to talk about the student. And again, I'm not going to go into detail here because you'll see an example later on. And then you'll come up based on kind of the data and your anecdotal data. What are the student's strengths? What are their needs? And what goals do you have for the student? Okay. All right. So why are we going to do the EL student profile? You know, or what's the purpose? This is actually taken from the California Dyslexia Guidelines. In those guidelines, they talk about ELs, and I think it's important, some of what they say and what the research shows. Students frequently have a wide variety of extrinsic factors that affect their lives and consequently their participation in school and progress in school. These differences must be examined at an individual level. And learning a language, coming to the United States from another place, that is an extrinsic factor. That's a big deal. And having a culture that's different from what sort of the mainstream culture is, that's an extrinsic factor that we need to be aware of. It affects our students' lives, all right? So, and notice how it says these differences must be examined at an individual level. Well, how do we do that? Well, we look at each student individually. We go in and we look at the data. We think about what we know about the student, and not just data, not just numbers, but what are their likes? What are their dislikes? Are they outgoing? Are they quiet? Are they, what kind of sports do they play? All these different things, looking at that student as an individual. Although a small percentage of English learners have an intrinsic disability, like a learning disability, a vast majority of English learners struggle while learning a second language, making a detailed evaluation of this population especially critical. And, this comes kind of the context of this is the kind of a backstory here is that often our English language learners are over-identified into special education because some learning disabilities in language can look very similar to learning a language, but they're not the same. And it is really important that we look individually at the student, what the extrinsic factors are, like learning a language, and separating that out from an intrinsic disability. And just what we know is that the disability will show up in their primary language. So it's not just a disability in English, it's got to be a disability in their primary language as well. It's got to show up there too. If it doesn't, then it's about them learning the language, okay? All right, so it's important that we look at our students individually, thus the EL student profile is very important. Okay, so this is sort of a transitional slide here, just kind of getting us ready to think about looking at assessments, gathering data, and the data comes from the assessments, and then what do we, where do we go with that? Where do we go once we have the data? So here on this little flag says assessments ground us and guide us. They show us where a student is. It's a snapshot in time, right? Where a student is, and then they help guide us in terms of where do we go from here? This is where we're starting, the assessment piece. And then now we can plan what we need to do to get them to the next level kind of thing. All right, so whoops. we'll look at the LPAC. The LPAC is the main test that students take that gives us information around their English language development. All right, so I want you, again, this is kind of an introduction. I want you to understand the big picture around the LPAC. All right, so the LPAC, there are two tests. One is the initial assessment. It is only taken one time in a student's schooling career in California. And it is based on the results from the home language survey. So what is the home language survey? It is a document that is given to parents or guardians of a student first entering public school in California. So this would be something that for many of our students, the parent guardian is filling this out in kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, so either TK or in kindergarten when they first enter our public school in California. If a student is coming from Texas and they're a freshman in high school, they will be handed, the parents, guardians will be handed the home language survey. What is it? It looks like this. I'll click on this and you can take a look at it. All right, where the name of the student, and the age, the grade level, the teacher, and then here it is. This is the important part. Which language did your child learn when they first began to talk? Which language does your child most frequently speak at home? Which language do you, parents, guardians, most frequently use when speaking with your child? Which language is most often spoken by adults in the home? If any of these answers are anything but English, the student is given the initial LPAC test. All right. Now, that's not what I want here. With the initial assessment, two things will happen, a possibility of two things. The student will be found to be fluent in English for their grade level. Okay, so if they are found to be fluent in English for their grade level, and that's important, right? For their grade level, that a kindergartner can speak and can speak and listen, kind of thing. Grade level English, they are considered fluent English proficient, FEP, fluent English proficient, and they will not receive English language development services. Okay. If a student, again, let's take our freshman coming in from Texas and they're given the home language survey, looks like they learn Spanish initially, they're given the initial assessment. And though they've been in the United States and speaking English since they came to Texas from Mexico when they were in 6th grade, they are not speaking, reading, writing, listening at the level of a freshman. They will then be given English language development services. Okay, they'll be an ELD. Okay. For students that are found to be fluent English proficient, they will never take the LPAC exam again. They're done. That's it. For students who are not found to be fluent English proficient for their grade level, they will then be administered this summative LPAC assessment every spring. Okay. And we're going to be looking at those results. When they take this spring LPAC, those results come back and we find out what level they are in reading, writing, speaking, listening, and their overall score. Okay. Now, when they are found to be fluent and they are at grade level, they are then redesignated. Okay. And this is redesignated fluent English proficient, or RFEP. And you'll hear, oh, they've been RFEP'd. That means that they've been found to be, through the LPAC and other indicators, fluent English proficient, or redesignated fluent English proficient. Okay. Now, the LPAC is not the only test that will allow the student to redesignate and stop receiving English language development services. It is one of 4 indicators, one of 4 criteria. Whoops, I didn't need to do that. I wanted to just highlight that. One of 4 criteria. What are the other criteria? Teacher recommendation, you know, what the teachers have been seeing, particularly the English language arts teachers, parent communication, the LPAC, of course. And then the 4th measure is a test. It's determined by the district, or the LEA. That's what kind of your district's called, the local education agency, that your LEA has designated some sort of other measure. In Sonoma County, it's often the CASP test, the SBAC, the CASP test, right? And so if the student is proficient in CASP, the parents are on board, the English language arts teacher says, yeah, they've been doing fine in my class. They've got a C or higher, you know, they seem to be doing fine. And the LPAC indicates they're a level 4, and the LPAC, they are redesignated fluent English proficient. Okay. Now, last class, when we talked about long-term English learners, they are students who have been in our school system at least 6-7 years, who have not yet met proficiency at their grade level on the LPAC. Right? So they are not yet redesignated. And we can have students, and it breaks my heart to say this, who have been with us since kindergarten, in our public schools, and they hit senior year and they are still not redesignated English proficient. They still have not passed the LPAC and have not reached proficiency in the CASP and that kind of thing. And that's really, it's pretty heartbreaking, really. I mean, that's, you know, that and that there's nothing that indicates that they have any kind of learning disability. Right? We're not, somehow our educational system is dropping the ball. We are not doing what we need to do to get these students to proficiency in English at their grade level. And that said, let me say this, every year it gets more challenging, doesn't it? Staying the same is falling behind, because every year the demands of language are greater. The demands of language are greater if from the 7th grade to the 9th grade or to the 12th grade. So the LPAC gets more challenging. And, you know, of course, just the academic rigor gets more challenging in the classes. So the summative assessment, kind of back to this, the summative assessment is given every spring to a student until they exit. And we hope that they do, that we hope that they're RFET. Okay. So why is it given? We kind of already covered this. So it's to identify students who are limited in English. And that's important so that students can receive the supports that they need to do well in school and have access to the full curriculum, right? Just because they don't know English well does not mean that they shouldn't be learning at the level of their grade level, right? So they should have access to the full curriculum, but they're going to have supports, strategies to help them access that full curriculum. All right, and we've already talked about who takes the LPAC. The initial one given to students from K-12 who English is not their primary language, and they're new to California schools. And then if they are found not to be at grade level English proficiency, then they every spring will be taking the LPAC until they reach a level 4, and then also have those other indicators so that they're then reclassified as fluent English proficient. Okay, so let's talk about what the LPAC is. All right. We know who takes it. So now, well, what are they doing with the, you know, what are our kiddos doing? I'm only going to address grades 6 through 12 here. The LPAC, of course, starts when they're, you know, kindergarten, but and some of these, like the written part, if they're kindergartners, and the reading part are either not there or pared way down. But 6 through 12, these are what our students are going to be asked to do. So there are 2 big portions to this test. There's oral language and there's written language. All right. the next slide is going to talk about written language. So in oral language, what are our students doing? They're focusing on listening and speaking, right? So oral language. In the listening part, what they're doing in the LPAC is they will listen to a short exchange, a student and teacher like talking, and then they'll answer questions about that short exchange. So it's their ability to understand what they're hearing. They will listen to a classroom conversation. This is all, as part of the testing, they're listening to a classroom conversation. Questions are asked about that. They listen to an oral presentation, basically like a teacher giving, a short little lecture, and then questions around that. And then they listen to a speaker's support and opinion. So kind of a thesis with supports. So they listen to that. And then they also are producing oral language, right? They're not just listening, they have to speak. So the test taker is asking them, they show them a picture. Tell me what's going on in this picture. And the student talks about the picture, and then the test administrator is scoring them on what they're saying about the scene, how detailed they get, the words they're using, that kind of thing. Speech functions. What this is the test administrator will prompt the student and say something like, and it's all on the test, so they're reading this, the administrator's reading this. You missed class yesterday because you were ill. You need to ask your teacher what was the homework that you missed. So we're prompting our student to ask a question, prompting our student that, what the context of this question is. You need to find out what the homework was. And then we score them on that. So speech function. So it would be ask a question, report information. There's these different speech functions and contexts for that speech function. Support an opinion. So the prompter would say something like, the administrator, your town is trying to decide whether to put in a swim center for the citizens or a skate park. What do you feel would be the best option, and why? So they're going to either say skate park because, or swim center because, and they have to support their opinion. But they're given a couple different choices, kind of scenarios, and then they have to have a thesis and support their opinion. They have to present and discuss information. So they read about something and then they have to tell you, what they read about. They're presenting and discussing the information. And then they are also summarizing an academic presentation. So that actually goes along with the listening to an oral presentation. They are going to then summarize orally what they heard in that academic presentation. So that's the listening and the speaking part of the oral language section. Then we have the written language section. So in the reading part, they're reading a short informational passage and answering questions. They're reading a student essay, answering questions on that. They're reading a literary passage, like from literature, and then they're reading an informational passage. So actually that's duplicated. I think something's wrong there. Anyway, they're reading different types of text, different genres, different types of text, and answering questions to check on their reading comprehension. And then in the writing section here, they are short writing. So they see a picture of something, describe what's going on in the picture. They do that in writing. They write about an experience. So there's a prompt that says that prompts them to write about a time when. Okay. Writing about academic information. So they read about something academically and then they write about it and then justify an opinion. So you've got like a thesis with support. All of these are fairly short writing assignments. Nobody's writing 2-3 pages kind of thing. They don't even have enough room in the booklet to do that. So they're fairly short writing, but a lot can be we can know a lot based on a fairly short piece of writing as far as students' writing ability. Okay, so that's the written language piece of the LPAC. All right. Now, student takes the LPAC in the spring, and then we get the report back about how they did. The school gets a copy, and that goes in the CUME folder, and the parents receive a copy. And we're going to take a look at what the parent copy looks like in a little bit. So I have linked here the description, their overall report. The overall LPAC gets a score for all 4 sections: listening, speaking, reading, writing. They put all that together and it gets a score of 1 through 4. Level 1, they're beginning to develop. Level 4, they're well developed, right here. Now, and we'll look on the next slide. We'll talk about it. We'll see what exactly that means. What does it mean beginning to develop, or what does it mean to be moderately developed, right? But the overall score, so you'll say, oh, that EL student's a level 3. Okay, so you get an overall score, but then it's also broken down into these composite scores. Remember, oral language and written language. The oral language gets a score of 1 to 4, and the written language gets a score of 1 to 4. And then this is where it gets sort of not complicated, but within oral language, remember we talked about there's a speaking part and listening part. Those are scored on a level of 1 to 3, 3 being the highest. Okay. Then they take those scores of speaking and listening, and they give an overall oral language score. And same with the written language scores, 1 through 4, but then that's sort of diced down smaller. The reading level, the writing level is at 1 through 3. That's how it's done. It's easy to kind of see these on the actual LPAC report. It's not as kind of complicated, or it makes more sense when you kind of look at it on the report. Here are the proficiency level descriptors here from the LPAC. Minimally, a level 1 means they're minimally developed, and they have minimally developed oral, listening, speaking, reading, writing kind of thing. And then you can see what is somewhat developed, moderately developed, and well developed. So the LPAC 1 through 4. Now, here's where it's not that it gets complicated, but it's like, why can't they just all sort of stay in the same scale? But they don't. When we talked about our ELD standards, which you read the ELD standards chapters 1 and 2 for homework for session 1. When we talked about our ELD standards, there are just 3 proficiency levels, right? Emerging, expanding, and bridging. And how they break up, and how they line up with the LPAC performance levels is shown in this graphic here. So a level 1 is emerging for proficiency level for the ELD standards. That lines up exactly. Expanding, though, bridges level 2 and level 3. If you have a range of level 3, there's a range of each of these levels for the LPAC performance level. There's a range of scores, and we'll see that in the reporting. You'll see what I'm talking about. But so expanding will be sort of mid-level 3 to beginning level 2. That's expanding. And then the bridging is mid-level 3, the upper mid-level 3 through level 4. Okay. And then just down here, when it's talking about level of support, how much scaffolding is needed, how much support is needed, obviously for level, for emerging, substantial support. They're in the early stages of gaining the language. You need a lot of support there. Expanding, you need moderate support, and then light support for bridging. All right. Now, I do want to draw your attention to this link here, the English Learner Toolkit. This is great. And again, I know some of you are maybe don't have a lot of English learners in your classroom, but those of you that do, this is a really great resource. So you can, of course, you have access through Canvas to this slide deck. So if you click on this, it's a live link. It's going to take you to this toolkit, and I want to just kind of show you here. there's an introduction. Chapter 2 talks about like what is a good comprehensive ELD program, planning for instruction, framing questions for lesson planning. I think that's really helpful. But chapter 4 gets into the nitty gritty, and it's going to cover some of the things that we're going to do in this class, talking about strategies. Right here, it shows academic vocabulary, the Freyer model. We're going to go over that. That'll be something we talk about in this class when we get there for academic vocabulary strategies. Sentence deconstruction, helping students pull sentences apart and understanding how we put sentences together by pulling apart and putting them back together, kind of a thing. So there's a lot of little strategies that are in here that can be really helpful for you. It talks about close reading, a collaborative retell, that kind of thing. So this is a great resource. It's there if and when you need it. Okay. So let's look at an LPAC student report. This is what the parents would receive once their student took the LPAC, the spring LPAC. This is not a initial LPAC. We're not even dealing with the initial LPAC, other than just that it's given one time based on the answers on the family survey, right? Family home language survey, I should say. Okay, so this is a fake, right? The young lady's name is Yuma, Arizona, and she is in grade 2. All right, and so here she has her student number, date of birth, grade 2. This tells us when the test was given, the elementary school name, the LEA, that's our local education agency, which is your school district, okay? And then this is the school district number there. All right, now, remember I said the LPAC has an overall score, taking the different parts, taking the oral language and the written language, combining it together. Here's the overall score. Yuma is a level 3. Okay, overall, and she has a 1531 score overall, moderately developed. Now, I want you to look at this score for a second. Down below here, it gives you the range of scores for each level. What do you notice about Yuma's level 3? Hopefully you notice that she's right on the cusp of level 4, right? So that number becomes really important. It's important for you as a teacher to know where they are. Are they a low level 3, a mid-level 3, a high level 3, or whatever the level might be? She is really close to level 4. All right. Now, here on page 2, it breaks that overall score down into oral language and written language. Our oral language, we know, included the listening and speaking tests. And it looks like she is, remember I said that this is out of 3 for the listening and speaking test. So she's a 2 out of 3 for both listening and speaking. And the overall score for oral language was a 1506, level 3. And I like how it shows here this sort of thermometer kind of thing, because you can see again that with her oral language, she's right on the cusp. Okay, then we look at written language. Oh, she got 3, 3s out of 3 out of 3 for reading, 3 out of 3 for writing, which is the highest she can get. And here she is, level 4, 1556. So she's even past the cusp. So why does this matter? As a teacher, to take a look at this and wanting to move her, really move the needle, if you will, for her to be a level 4, we're going to focus on that oral language, on that listening and speaking portion, because that's where we want to bump her up into a 4. Okay, so that's why actually digging down into the data a little bit more really gives us an indication, because you're like, oh yeah, Yuma's a level 3. It doesn't tell the whole story, does it? So to take a look at this and understand the scores and what that's indicating about a student's proficiency level, I think is really important. Now, at the bottom here on page 2, it will it will list the history. So Yuma has taken this test one time before, grade 1, she took it, and she was moderately developed level 3, but you can see she has made some growth, right? And again, that really is important, the growth, because if she hadn't, how do I put this? If she had stayed the same, she would have gone down, because it's more challenging. The grade 2 test is more challenging than the grade 1 test. So she not only, kept up, she surpassed keeping up, right? So she moved herself into a level, a higher level 3 on this test for second grade. Okay. For some of our students, they're going to have a whole lot of scores down there because they've taken this test for many years, and so it will list those previous score histories there. Okay, but a pretty easy to look at document here. Now, I have also clicked, I'm going to click on this so you can kind of see this. This is a guide that really kind of goes into detail about the reporting levels and so on, and the parent gets this with the information to kind of let them get the whole picture. But so it talks about each part, kind of as I did here for you, but talks about each part, what it is and how to read it. Okay, so that's the post-test guide is there. Okay, and here is the scores, the scale score ranges. So if you were interested in where exactly your student is falling, this gives you from grade 7 through 12. I didn't put in grades K6. There are pages that are K6. I just took a snapshot, a screenshot of this page, which is 7 through 12. Okay. All right. So we've talked about the LPAC, what it is, when it's taken, who takes it, that kind of thing, what the scores mean, how to read the scores. And now we're to the point where these are the data points. Now, what do we do with it? Let's put that knowledge into action. It's not enough to simply know, oh, this kid is, a 3, this kid has, is emerging or expanding in their English language development. We need to put it into action. This is where our planning and our teaching, where the rubber hits the road, kind of a thing. So we have looked at the student LPAC profile, the test results. We've talked about the EL student profile. We're going to do that in a little bit more detail here, where I told you I'm going to show you an example. And then I'm going to introduce to you this supports and strategies log that it's going to be an ongoing document due the last class. And then I want to introduce the lesson plan to you too, because that's something you're going to be doing for this class. All right. Now, what we looked at with Yuma was the report that a parent would receive in the mail after the student has taken the test. This is what would show up in the CUME folder for a student when you look at the CUME. It also, at least in our student information system of ARIES that Petaluma City Schools uses, if you dig deep enough, if you click enough clicks, you can get this. This is what will show up in our student information system. The scores will show up, but then you click it again and you can actually see like a hard copy, if you will, a screenshot of what is living in the CUME folder. And this is the piece of paper that'd be in there. All right, so this is an actual report for Alexandra, and her overall score was a 1454. This is her 9th grade results, and she scored a level 1. And for us, there's this dashboard, kind of speedometer look rather than the thermostat that the parents get, or thermometer that the parents get. We get the dashboard. speedometer. So you can see here, without having to look at the range of scores, where she is in a level 1. She's pretty solid level 1. She is not yet right on the cusp of a 2, right? So, you know, there's certainly work that some language proficiency that needs to happen overall. Now, here is her oral language score. Again, she is a level 1, and we know within oral you have listening and speaking, and she is beginning. She's at beginning level 1 for both of those. All right. And same for written language. She is level 1 for both reading and writing, as well as the overall score. Right. So that's something you would be looking at. Now, let's go back to our holistic EL student profile, and let's look at exactly what I want you to do. Let's say Alexandra is one of your students. So this is what you're going to do. This is an example for one student, Alexandra G. So her LPAC scores, overall, she was a level 1 with a 1454. Her oral language was a level 1 with a 1419, and her written language was a level 1 with a 1489. With listening, speaking, reading, writing, she was beginning level. All right. And again, we got that off of the that LPAC score, but this also lives in your student information system without even looking at the actual sheet. Okay. Also, I've asked you to put in the CASP scores. So again, these are available in the student information system. Her ELA score was a level 1, 2348 for that test. And her math was also a level 1 for 23 at 2311. All right. So she's a level 1 across the board. All right. So anecdotal data. And like I said earlier, this is really what I'm most interested in. I mean, okay, scores are scores, but what do you know about this kid? You know, there's more to a kid than just a number, right? So what I know about Alexandra, she immigrated with her family from Guatemala 2 years ago and spoke no English. She has been enrolled in school since arriving. She loves to draw. She's very quiet in class, but talks enthusiastically in Spanish to other Spanish fluent students. Okay, so, you know, again, like, well, why does it matter that she loves to draw or that she's really social in her primary language, her home tongue? Why does that matter? Well, it kind of not even kind of, it does, as you start thinking about ways to take a student's strengths and build on those strengths and help you to, you know, with your goals. So here's an example. Strengths: animated and talkative in her L1, in her primary language, very artistic and has beautiful handwriting. She's always willing to begin working in class when assignment is given. When encouraged to write in Spanish, her writing production is high. Okay, so she's very comfortable in writing in Spanish, and you know, then conceivably in reading in Spanish as well, although I didn't have that information. But writing, she could just go if she was writing in her L1. Right. But also very, you know, wanting to please, wanting to get going right away if she understands what the requirements are, that kind of thing. What are her needs? She seems to struggle working independently. She needs support in understanding my directions and in accessing the text. She needs support in writing as well. Okay, so these are things I've noticed that she needs. So what are my goals for Alexandria? And these goals, these are kind of informal kinds of goals. I'm not expecting you, not that any of you are special ed teachers, I'm not expecting you to write like an IEP type goal, but she will do this to 80% proficiency. No, 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 no. This is just more informal. So my goals are to continue to make Alexandra feel comfortable and welcome in my classroom. I want to pair her with another student who speaks Spanish to help translate when she's having difficulty. I want to find a text written in Spanish to help her grasp the concepts before she begins reading the class text. I also want to find a way to encourage her drawing and connect it to learning content in my class, perhaps taking notes graphically? ? Okay, so that's an example of taking one student and doing the linguistic data and academic data, the anecdotal data, and then taking that and giving you a plan understanding strengths, needs, and what are your goals for this student. All right. So again, I'm asking that you do not do any more than 5, and hopefully at least that you have at least one EL student. All right. Now, if you do not have an EL student at all, you're still going to do this. And why is because whether a student is learning English as another language, not necessarily a second language, it might be their third or fourth language, but they're learning English. All right, but we're all learning English to some extent. We are all English language learners, right? We don't have a full command of our language. There are words I come across that I don't know. I learn new things about my language quite frequently. So I'm an English language learner, so are all of our students. So I would say if you don't have any English language learners, at least take someone who you think struggles in reading and writing, speaking, listening kind of thing, someone who struggles, and then you won't obviously have LPAC data if they're, if their L1 is English, but you will have the academic data, the anecdotal data, strengths, needs, goals. All right. But the fact that you all are teaching in Sonoma County or Lake County, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that if not all of you, almost all of you have at least one English language learner in amongst your students. Okay. That is not what I want. Nope, it keeps giving me that. I've got to go this way. All right. So now switching gears to another assignment. So that English language learner profile, that a holistic EL student profile, is due by next class. All right. This one is not due till the last class. So let me talk a little bit about this assignment in general before we kind of dig in and talk about what exactly it's all about, what you need to do. The Be a Teacher program, of course, we will, by the end of the second year, and with you passing your teacher performance assessment, we will be issuing you a preliminary credential, right? So you're good to go, and then you will go through the teacher induction program to clear your credential so that you'll have a clear. Now, for us to be able to present you with or award you with a preliminary credential, we have to be, certified by the California Department of Education, who comes in and checks us out and makes sure that we are an institution that is up to par, right? And we have to prove that we are teaching you certain things, that you are learning certain things, not just that we're teaching, actually. You can teach, but if you're not learning, nothing's happening, right? So that you are actually learning things from our program. So there are certain documents that we've created kind of as evidence of this learning. And the English Language Learner Instructional Supports and Strategies log, big long mouthful, is one of these documents. All right. We want to be able to show the, CDE that if we're, or CDC, excuse me, that we are in fact teaching and you are learning and gathering strategies that help support English language learners, and that you know how to use them and that you've used them. So thus the log. All right. So this is what it looks like. And now I want to go into the instructions. So I'm going to click on this, and this slide gives you all the instructions, but I'm going to go into the directions here, the document that lives in Canvas also, that is what you would see for the instructions or the directions on how to do this. Okay. So it gives a little blurb here at the top, with your specific teaching assignment in mind, choose and log strategies that resonate with you, that seem to fit with your teaching style and course content. We're going to be going over a whole lot of strategies. So not all of them are going to land for you. Some of them you're like, yeah, that doesn't feel like it would work in my class. It doesn't feel like it would work for me or my students or whatever. And other ones like, oh, that's a great one, and I've actually used it before, or I really like that, I want to try that with my students. So you're choosing, hopefully, strategies, not just to throw them on your log, but things that you actually would use or have used. All right. Now, your log is due by our last class, Wednesday, October 19th. It should be uploaded into Canvas, and it's going to be worth 35 points. All right. So what are you actually going to do? You are going to record at least 3 strategies or supports for each of the following literacy demands, for a total of 12 strategies. So you'll do 3 that focus on reading, 3 on writing, 3 on speaking, listening, and 3 on vocabulary building, for a total of 12 strategies, right? For each of those strategies that you've logged, you're going to list the TPEs that are addressed by the support. So let's go back in. I want to go back to this log so we can kind of look at this. So here's where you're going to list the strategies. You'll list the strategy, and then you'll say, is it for reading? You'll have like 3 reading, 3 writing, 3 speaking, listening, 3 vocabulary building. All right. Then you're going to go through the TPEs and list what TPEs you feel that strategy that you just listed addresses. Why this piece? Because really the TPEs are essential for you to become really familiar with. You remember I said to you that you will, at the end of the 2 years, and after you have passed the teacher performance assessment, we will award you a preliminary teaching credential. That teacher performance assessment is a portfolio that you're putting together that proves to the Department of Education that you have met the teacher performance expectations. It's directly connected. You will be citing TPEs in your teacher performance assessment. So the more you become familiar with it, the more that you can connect what you're doing to what expectation it is reflecting, the better. All right. So what TPEs is that particular strategy touching on? Then you're going to write the description of use. You're going to give me a brief description of how this strategy is used. Now this 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th column, evidence of use. You are not going to do that for all of your strategies that you list. In fact, you're only going to do it for one of the strategies or supports. Okay, so of the 12 strategies you've logged and described, choose one and provide evidence of use. That's in that column, the evidence. Whoops, that's not the one I want. The evidence of use. All right, so let's say you used a graphic organizer and you were using this to help support students in reading comprehension. All right. How are you going to show evidence of use? In my experience, the thing that's been easiest for the students to do, the interns to do, is just take a picture of a graphic organizer that a student's filled out. Take a picture of it and link the picture to this document. All right. You could also, let's say you have your students do a academic conversation. You could take a short video of them having that academic conversation, and you can link it into this document. All right, for me, that would work too. But a picture or a short video would be what you would do to provide evidence for the one strategy that you choose. And then for that one strategy, you're going to reflect on the use of it. What happened when you used it, what worked and what didn't work. And that's this last column. Again, so evidence of use and reflection of use should only be for one strategy. I mean, you certainly can do it for more, but I'm trying not to be it shouldn't be too onerous. You're getting 12 strategies and you're filling out the first 4 columns for all 12. And then with one of them, you'll fill in the last 2 columns. All right. If you have any questions, I mean, this is not ideal, I understand, in watching a presentation here tonight that you can't ask questions. but please reach out to me, email me. It's probably best for you to email me through the PET K-12 email. If you message me through Canvas, I will see it eventually, but I only see Canvas messages when I actually am in Canvas and I go to grade something or whatever. My email, I check all the time. It's something that is just like, multiple times a day I'm looking at emails. So if you have a question, best case is just to email me and I will, try to answer your question as best I can. I don't want you, being confused or not knowing what to do and having a level of frustration that I don't want. So I know that this is not the ideal way of just sort of my stand and deliver tonight. And especially the fact that I'm assigning 2 assignments, 2 tasks for you to do, the EL student profile and the instructional strategies and supports log, but this is how we have to do it. I apologize. Okay, so again, if you have any questions, please reach out. So this is due at the last class. Tonight, we're actually going to be talking about speaking and listening strategies or oral strategies. So if you find there are, 3 strategies that you discovered tonight that you like, pop them on your log and you're good to go for that. So this particular, again, this slide just covers those directions in a slide form. Okay, now this is where you're going to go out and do this on your own. You don't need me to go through all of these. You will need to obviously open your slide deck in Canvas. These are all linked on your slide deck, other than the elbow, partner, turn, and talk. And I'll talk about that in just a second. These are some really great strategies that support student oral language. Now, let me talk about this for a moment in terms of our English language learners, as well as all of our students. One of the things that is really powerful about the strategies that we're going to be talking about in this class is that they're not just for our students who are designated English language learners. Remember what I just said, we're all English learners. So these work for all our students. They support all our students in some way, shape, or form. And so let's just say that. So this is if you've only got 3 ELs in your classroom, fine. You've got 27 other kids who are learning the language as well, right? They're not completely proficient in English. So use these strategies to help support your students as they're learning academic language, all right? Conversational language, yeah, they've got that. Kids have got that, but very few have really well-honed academic language skills in high school. All right, so these can support all students. And the other thing that I want to say about oral language in particular for our English language learners, our students learning English, is that if there's one thing that our students don't get enough of, it's oral language, academic oral language practice, right? They might be really skilled in their conversational language. They might, as I mentioned with long-term English learners, they might have been speaking English or learning English since they came to public school in California in kindergarten, and they're now in 10th grade, and they still cannot pass the LPAC. Why? Because they don't have the academic language skills. They have the conversational skills, but they don't have the breadth of vocabulary that they need to pass that test. They don't have the vocabulary, whether it is passive in understanding it and listening to it and understanding what's being said, or in reading academic language, so longer sentences, more passive voice use. So that's things you'd see in a textbook. They don't have the productive language, the ability to speak the language using more sophisticated words. All right. So with all of that, that hampers their ability to pass the LPAC. and not just to pass the LPAC, but to do well in class and ultimately be able to go on to college and career, right? So the supporting our EL students in oral language is critical. And we know through research that very little time do they spend in oral language, academic oral language interaction in school. In fact, it's criminal. They're often quiet, right? And they're not the ones raising their hand right away. And sometimes teachers think, oh, I don't want to call on that student. Maybe they're not comfortable. But the more that we don't give them opportunities to speak, we're not developing their oral language. They're speaking and they're listening. Okay, so these strategies give them some really some fun ways in your classroom to make this happen in an organized, intentional way. All right, not just chatting, because chatting does not build your academic language, right? So these are ways that will encourage that academic conversation that's good for all our kiddos. So elbow partner, turn and talk. You give a topic, and they turn and talk to each other. So that's pretty self-explanatory. For each one of these, I want you to click on the link and take a look. The famous person mystery is a short video, and the rest of them are just descriptions of different strategies. And if you find, think, pair, share, I'm sure you've used it, or you certainly know it exists. So you could put that on your strategies log if it's something that makes sense to you, you've used it, you will use it, that kind of thing. So we're looking at what we've got: 1, 2, well, elbow partners, kind of like think, pair, share, but let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's actually a 9th that I'm going to pop up here in just a second. We have 9 oral language strategies for tonight for you to take a look at. Choose, if it makes sense to you, choose 3 of them and put them on your log tonight or very soon. What I would recommend you do is to put strategies on your log after each class. We will go over strategies in each of those 4 domains. What I hope you don't do is wait till the very last minute and try to throw in a bunch of strategies. It's not going to be that meaningful to you. So I'm hoping that this will be a document that it will be meaningful, useful, and will really reflect your learning and your use of your learning, right? All right, so you notice that this last one, talk, moves, and checklist, is highlighted. It's because I want, if we were doing this in person, we would be taking a deeper dive into this. But I have a slide here that I want you to take the dive by yourself. This is a short video from Edutopia illustrating students using talk moves. All right, and what talk moves are basically sentence starters to get students to prompt students into academic discussion, all right, at the academic discourse. And you'll notice on the student's desk right here, this is the talk move. It's like a little bookmark that the teachers made, and it's taped to the desk. So in your course session course materials, you in Canvas, you'll notice that I have a handout there for you for talk moves. You can copy it and give every student one for their desk. You could put a big one up on a poster on your wall to have students using this. And I will say this about talk moves or academic conversation: it's not natural. It's not the way kids normally talk. It's going to feel uncomfortable and strained at first, but it's something that if you give them opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, you'll start hearing them just do this automatically without prompting, without having to look at their desk for a sentence starter or look at the wall with the poster. They just begin to absorb this, and it becomes the way they talk with each other, okay, in an academic setting. So it's really powerful way of supporting our learners. And when you get into 242 with me, we're going to go into even deeper. We're going to go even deeper with academic conversations. And there's a book by Jeff Swears that's fabulous about academic conversations. But this is just one little kind of tip of the iceberg idea around supporting our students as they talk in our classrooms about what they're learning. All right, so take a look at the short video. Take a look at the talk moves and the checklist and that kind of thing. All right, this slide is, as we talked about in our session 1, I know that you have sort of independent learning hours that you need to do and log for the to show that you've done extra for English language for your ELD kind of thing. So I've talked with Kelly Daly, and she's on board with this, that instead of assigning certain things as homework, these readings, these become extending the conversation. These are opportunities for you to read and learn further. And as you choose to, read these, please log your time. These work for that independent learning piece. All right. You'll notice at the 4th bullet down, there's a video. It's watching a discussion strategies. All right. So each class, there will be extending the conversation opportunities for you. They are not homework. They're not assignments, but they are opportunities for you to build your time for that independent learning. All right. And then here's our homework for tonight. You are going to complete the holistic EL student profile, right, which is due for next class. Please read both chapter 2 and chapter 3 in our scaffolding language, scaffolding learning in this book, right? Chapters 2 and 3. I would like you to choose 3 speaking supports, oral supports, and add them to your log. And then what I'd like you to do, because this is going to be something we're going to do next class, I want you to go into the California ELD standards in chapter 3. Chapter 3 is enormous. It is all the standards K-12, and you just scroll through and find your grade level. If your grade level is 9, 10, 11, or 12, you'll find that they are clumped together, 9, 10, and 11, 12. All the other grades have their own individual standards. So find your grade level ELD standards and read through them, thinking about how can you incorporate one or more of these standards into a lesson plan you'll be teaching. Because, again, while we're talking about strategies to support English learners and that kind of thing, ultimately you're writing lesson plans, right? You're teaching. So your teaching has to address these standards. And of course, in our Be a Teacher lesson plan template, it asks you in your lessons to identify one or more ELD standards that you're going to be addressing in that particular lesson. So the more you can become familiar with the ELD standards for your particular grade level, the better. And we are going to be using, you're going to be picking an ELD standard and putting into a lesson plan for this class. That's where we're headed and what we're going to be talking about next class. All right, there is a Canvas response for session 2, formative assessment in Canvas. Please get that done before our next class. And good night, be well. I will see you next Wednesday, actually live on Zoom, October 5th. And planning for success is our week 3 theme, standards and the strategies. So this is kind of, we're talking about lesson planning, right? So that's where we're headed. So I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you for hanging out with me. I'm sorry that this couldn't have been more interactive and in person, but again, just know I'm there for you. Reach out, email me if you have any questions or concerns. All right, have a great evening.